Thank you. I appreciate the invitation. It's an honor to be here with you. I'm going to approach this topic from a completely different perspective. I'll say it from the macro perspective as the micro versus the micro perspective. Much of the conversation has been, how do we keep democracies vibrant and open and pluralistic here where we care about it? But there's a part of the world that isn't talking about how do we make sure our citizens can be more participatory in government. So I'm focused on how do we make sure democracies are not overtaken by autocracies when it comes to AI. So I know we don't want to be negative, so rather than saying I'm here against World War III, I'm here for how do we have deterrence that keeps that from happening? How do we deter aggression? And in our view, that means we need to have the other side know that we have such a lead that when they wake up in the morning, you know, it's not today that they're going to spark that aggression. That's my focus. And if you look at it, we had a morning we woke up in August of 2021 where China sent a hypersonic glide missile around the world that after going and circling the world, navigated to a particular spot that they had set. That surprised us. That was beyond our technology. In many ways at the time, we'd come up with most of the foundational research, and much of the technology that they used to do that was our technology, even though it threatened America. But it did prove that even a country that controls its own citizens from a data perspective can advance technology. So I look at, you know, and I enjoyed in Ambassador Tang's video, you had a person saying you can lose our democracy with just a couple of missiles. So I'm focused on that aspect of losing democracy. And I think we're really at an inflection point and really how we respond to this, because technology is really the foundation for our economic prosperity, that we're ahead of everybody else, and our security, and therefore, if we can't secure our values, it all depends on us keeping this technological edge, which I believe is very much at risk. We had a bipartisan congressional committee that was headed by Eric Schmidt, the CEO, former CEO of Google, as well as the former Deputy Defense Secretary Robert Work. And they came out with a commission that came out in 21, and I'll quote them: "America is not prepared to defend or compete in the AI era. This is the tough reality we must face, and it is this reality that demands a comprehensive whole-of-nation action to defend against AI threats, responsibly employ AI for national security, and win the broader technological competition for the sake of prosperity, security, and welfare. China's plans, resources, and progress should concern all Americans. It is an AI peer in many ways and a leader in some. We take seriously China's ambition to surpass the United States as the AI leader within a decade," unquote. So that's what the bipartisan commission, congressionally sponsored, put forth. And so I've put out 10 ideas as to how do we make sure we win. The first of which we're talking about a lot in this conference, and that is to have trust, build trust. Because if you don't trust some technology, you're not going to embrace it. Now, Edelman does a survey of trust around the world every year, and what they found in the last 5 years globally, trust in the top AI companies went from 61% down to 53% in the last 5 years. But within the US, it went down even more. It went down 15 points. So we have 35% of Americans trusting AI, as opposed to 53% in the world. That means that we're going to get more resistance, frankly, why conferences like this are so important, because if we're resisting the technology advances and other countries aren't, that puts us in a path to losing. So I'm not going to go into all the things you can do to build AI trust. This conference and everything that's been talked about as part of that, so I fully endorse that. But in the end, as we build those governings that can help build trust, we do need to make sure that we don't unwittingly put restrictions on America that keep it behind. Sandy, you mentioned that some of the people in Hoover are worried about that. The second thing is we need to invest more in our own capabilities. You know, we can't just win by trying to hold someone back we need to sprint forward. And we're seeing many cases, Huawei's new chip that's taking market share from Apple right now is an example of, they've been under sanctions, since 2017, and they're still giving Apple a run for their money. So we need to run faster. We passed a CHIPS and Science Act that we're fully funding the chip side of it, but it significantly increased our research funding because China is catching up to us in terms of total research funding. We're not funding what was authorized in the CHIPS and Science Act, and we need to do a better job of funding that extra science spending to Harvard and universities I've led and other universities around the world to keep ahead, particularly in AI. In talent, the PRC has twice the number of science, technology, engineering, and math, STEM PhDs as the U.S. We rank amongst the lowest in terms of the propensity of our students, American students, to go into STEM fields. So we've always relied on having people from around the world come to America and help us advance our technology. We've had about a 2/3 drop within American universities writ large in terms of the number of Chinese students coming here. We've had a big step up in Indian students. The net of it is we need to continue to be a magnet for talent, whether it be immigration, whether it be our welcoming environment, and we need to recognize that we need that talent to win. And we need to keep our computing advantage. Right now, NVIDIA chips ruled the world, but there are new forms of compute power that could be faster and greener, whether it be optical or neuromorphic or quantum. We need to make sure that when we get to that stage of development that we, again, are ahead. And we need to make sure we keep our innovative system, whether it be good data sets that we can work with, as well as the collaborations that make it work. The third thing is we don't want to aid the PRC's military. That was why we had the October 2022 very profound change in American policy restricting high-end chips as well as chip manufacturing equipment. That's why we limited outbound investing in August. But we also they have access to that high chips and others through our cloud computing, as well as through advanced AI models. And there haven't been restrictions on those. That is something that I would suggest we need to consider. And we also find that high bandwidth memory chips are perhaps a gate that we need to look at. So there are more to do, as you will, to make sure that we're not selling the rope that someone else is going to hang us with. Fourth, we need to not allow our digitally driven devices and our people to be able to be manipulated. This is what you see behind the restrictions on Huawei, on port cranes, on software in vehicles, and they're considering it on small drones and LiDAR. But also, when you think about it's been mentioned TikTok, why might we restrict it on TikTok? It's to the extent an algorithm can get the people to think a certain way against your own government, we can't allow that. So having it be pluralistic, we'd like to have TikTok if it's not something that could be used to turn our people in a way that's against the interests of the country and for another country. Fifth, we need eliminated dependencies in the tech supply chain. There's been a lot on this more recently. Frankly, when I was in Congress, we never thought about supply chains. Now it's a key focus of not just the U.S. government, but other governments. But we need to do a better job of cultivating sources for areas where we're overly dependent with other countries that we're not the logical producers of. That's something we need to do more. Sixth, we need to market to most nations possible. As we're restricting from those countries we're worried about, if we're overly restrictive and we don't give it to countries at the edge, anyone we don't allow within the tech ecosystem of the U.S. and the West is, I'm sure China will be happy to have them in their tech ecosystem. The trick is our country's companies today are the biggest, the most sales. That means they got the most resources to plow into research and development to stay ahead. If they don't continue to be the biggest and the best, restricting it from China means they're going to come up with an alternative. It may not be as good as the West from the beginning, but they got a big market in China and the parts of the global south that they have aligned with them. We need to make sure that we are reaching out to as many countries as possible with our tech. Big, difficult decisions as we face in the Gulf states. You know, we're a bit concerned about some of their practices. Do we want to really share our best technology with them? They're kind of close to China. But on the other hand, do we want to push them completely into the other sphere? Seventh, if there's a contest for access to data, those in the AI world that have the most data win. Right now, we don't really have access to China's data. They do. They have large access to our data. Are we putting enough restrictions on particularly sensitive data? Also, we're losing the telecommunications equipment battles around the world, with Huawei having 35 to 40% of the market share outside of the US. And how do we know they're not using the fact that they own the telecom to harvest the data to train data models without the people that have that data even knowing it? Particularly when a lot of what they do is they do a service model. So they're not just selling you the Huawei equipment, they're selling you the service of having the Huawei equipment run by Huawei. That should be a concern. You also see with the digital yuan. The digital yuan is designed to harvest data. So having something on more of a blockchain model instead of that is something we should be pushing. The eighth is, of course, we need a lead in digital standards. They've done a much better job of engaging with the International Telecommunications Union and other standard-setting bodies than we have. We have to make sure we do that. And then finally, the ninth is collaborating with allies. We can't do any of this if our allies aren't with us, if we do the restrictions, but our allies go around that, they don't do any effect. We also need to innovate together. We're here in Harvard. You know that innovation is an iterative process where you want to be able to bounce back and forth ideas with the top people in your field. Right now, we do twice as much collaboration, our professors, with China as we do with Europe. And Europe's got a lot of good technology. We are not doing enough collaboration amongst academics in America, with Europe, with Australia, with India, with Japan, and others that we need to do more. And 10th, we need to stay ahead with defense AI technologies. Ultimately, we want our military AI to be better than their military AI. And nearly every aspect of military has an AI portion of it. Recently, Biden administration, just within the last several weeks, put out the National Security Memorandum on AI, which says, you know, we are going to only use it for democratic values. We're going to specifically make sure that it's protecting privacy and discrimination and human rights. It's a classified document, so I'm not going to give you details, but net, by defining where the boundaries are, hopefully that allows us to stay within the values that we're all talking about here, but ultimately make sure that we stay ahead. So those are just 10 ideas that I'm focused on. Right now, everything we're doing is more ad hoc. I suggest we need a more comprehensive approach to this, and we need to make sure that in the end, not only is democracy vibrant within democracies, but democracies are also having superior technologies to those that might mean us harm. Thank you all very much.